Ireland's greatest hero once became so consumed by rage that his own body betrayed the laws of nature itself. Cú Chulainn's battle fury wasn't just anger, it was a supernatural transformation so horrifying that even his closest allies would flee in terror. His hair would ignite with sparks, one eye would sink deep into his skull, while the other bulged forward like a cauldron, and his very flesh would twist until he resembled something closer to demon than man. The Irish called this the ríastrad, the warp spasm, and when it seized him, not even Cú Chulainn himself could control what happened next. But why would the gods curse their greatest champion with such monstrous power? And what price did Ulster pay for having a hero who could win any battle but might destroy everything he sought to protect? In the ancient kingdom of Ulster, there lived a boy whose destiny was written in prophecy and sealed in blood. Born as Satanta, he would become Cú Chulainn, the Hound of Ulster, after killing the fierce guard dog of the smith Culainn with nothing but his hurley stick and sliotar. The druid Cathbad had prophesied that whoever took arms on a certain day would achieve glory beyond measure, but their life would burn bright and brief as a summer flame. When 7-year-old Satanta overheard this prophecy, he demanded weapons immediately. King Conchobar himself handed the boy spears and shield, though every weapon shattered in the child's supernatural grip until they found arms strong enough to channel his divine heritage. The boy had the blood of gods flowing in his veins. His true father was Lug of the Long Arm, champion of the Tuatha De Danann, and that otherworldly power demanded an otherworldly price. To master his terrifying gift, Cú Chulainn travelled across the sea to the Island of Shadows, where the warrior woman Scathach taught heroes the arts of war. But Scathach's training went far beyond swordplay and spearwork. She taught him the deadly Gí Bolga, a barbed spear that entered the body as one point, but spread into 24 barbs inside the victim, ensuring no wound could ever heal. More importantly, she taught him to control the ríastrad. Though control was perhaps too strong a word. The battle fury was like trying to harness a wildfire or chain the wind to storm. It could be directed, but never truly tamed. During his training, Cú Chulainn fought and defeated Aoife, another warrior woman and Scathach's greatest rival. Their battle was so fierce it shattered the mountainside, and when Aoife's sword broke against his spear, he bound her with terms of peace that would echo through generations. Queen Medb of Connacht coveted the brown bull of Ulster. She raised an army to take it by force. But Ulster's warriors lay helpless under an ancient curse that struck them with the pangs of childbirth in their hour of greatest need, all except Cú Chulainn, whose divine blood made him immune to mortal magic. At 17 years old, he stood alone against the armies of 4 provinces. Medb had expected a swift victory, her vast host sweeping across Ulster like flood water. Instead, she found her path blocked by a single youth who invoked the ancient right of single combat. By the laws of honor, her army could not advance while a champion held the ford, and so began the greatest series of duels in Irish legend. Day after day, Cú Chulainn faced Connacht's finest warriors at the river crossing. Day after day, he sent their bodies downstream while their blood turned the water red. But holding back, an entire army was taking its toll, and the rage that made him invincible was growing harder to control. It was the death of his charioteer League that finally shattered Cú Chulainn's restraint. When he saw his loyal friend struck down by a Connacht spear, something fundamental broke inside the young hero's mind. The ríastrad took him completely, and this time he made no effort to fight it. His body began the terrible transformation. His hair stood on end, each strand sparking like struck iron. One eye receded so far into his skull it could barely be seen, while the other bulged forward larger than a cauldron. His mouth gaped open to reveal his lungs and liver, and his warrior's light blazed from his forehead like a pillar of fire. But most terrifying of all was the way his body turned completely around inside his skin, so that his heels and calves and the backs of his knees faced forward. When the transformation was complete, what stood at the ford was no longer quite human. Medb's warriors looked upon this apparition and felt their courage drain away like water from a broken vessel. What followed was less a battle than a harvest of death. In his transformed state, Cú Chulainn carved through Connacht's ranks like winter wind through wheat. The Gí Bolga found its mark with every throw, and his sword Caladbolg split shields and armor as if they were parchment. Warriors who had never known fear fled screaming from the battlefield. Those who stood their ground died so quickly they had no time to understand what was happening to them. Cú Chulainn moved with inhuman speed, appearing in 3 places at once, striking down men faster than the eye could follow. The river ran red for miles downstream, and ravens came from across Ireland to feast on the dead. Queen Medb herself watched in horror from her chariot as her great invasion dissolved into chaos and slaughter. She had brought the armies of 4 provinces to take one bull, and now she was watching them die at the hands of one terrible, transformed boy. Victory in the ríastrad always came with a price that made winning feel like defeat. When the battle fury finally began to ebb, Cú Chulainn found himself standing in a field of corpses, many of them barely more than boys who had followed their lords to war. The supernatural strength was draining from his limbs, leaving behind wounds he hadn't felt, while the rage sustained him. Worse still was the memory of what he had become, the feeling of his humanity sliding away as something primal and terrible took control. His foster father Fergus found him there, weeping over the body of young Lebor, barely 16 and dead by Cú Chulainn's own hand. The Hound of Ulster had saved his people, but he could never save himself from what he became in their defense. Each time the ríastrad took him, he feared it would never let him return to human form. Each time it released him, he wondered if the next transformation would be his last. The Druids understood what others could not, that Cú Chulainn's rage was not merely mortal anger amplified, but the fury of the gods themselves flowing through human flesh. His divine father Lug had gifted him with power beyond any mortal warrior, but godhood and humanity were never meant to occupy the same vessel. Each transformation tore at the fabric of his mortal form, burning away pieces of his soul like fuel in a divine fire. The ríastrad grew stronger with each battle and harder to escape. What had once been a weapon he could wield was becoming a prison he could not escape. The prophecy had promised him glory beyond measure, but it had never mentioned that glory would feel so much like damnation. Cú Chulainn was becoming something new, neither fully god nor fully man, but caught between both worlds and welcomed by neither. In the end, it was the ríastrad that killed him. When his enemies finally cornered the wounded hero at the pillar stone, they expected to face a dying man. Instead, Cú Chulainn tied himself upright to the stone and let the battle fury take him one last time. Even as his life ebbed away, the transformation made him so terrible to behold that none dared approach until a raven landed on his shoulder, the sign that death had finally claimed Ireland's greatest champion. But even in death, the rage burned on. His sword hand gripped Caladbolg so tightly that when Lugaid tried to take it, the blade sprang forward and severed the man's hand at the wrist. Ulster's hound had protected his people one final time, but the cost of that protection had consumed everything he might have been. The gods had made him their perfect weapon, and weapons, in the end, are meant to be broken. The Irish say that on nights when battle threatens Ulster, you can still hear the war cry of Cú Chulainn echoing across the hills, and sometimes travellers glimpse a figure standing at the old fords, forever guarding his people from invasion. His rage had saved a kingdom, but it had also shown the terrible price of divine power flowing through mortal flesh. The Táin tells us that heroism and monstrosity are often separated by the thinnest of lines, and that sometimes the greatest victories are won by those willing to sacrifice not just their lives, but their very humanity for the people they love. The Hound of Ulster became exactly what his people needed him to be, but in doing so, he could never again be simply what he wanted to be. The next time you hear thunder rolling across Irish hills, remember that some storms are born not in the sky, but in the hearts of heroes who loved too fiercely to ever find peace.